Hello and good day, everyone. This is your boy Isaac,
And this is your boy Bryce.
and we are Brothers on Tennis. And folks, we've got something special for you today. One of the reasons that Bryce and I pulled this whole Brothers on Tennis concept together was because of Arthur Ashe. He has been someone that we have looked up to and followed, not only from a tennis standpoint, but just from a global impact standpoint. And we're here today to talk about him and celebrate him for his 50 years it's been since he won Wimbledon. And Bryce, like I said, you know this is special. We've got a group of guys who are very familiar with Arthur. They have stories about Arthur, and it's going to be really a great time hearing some of those stories and some of that information. So I'll pass it to you to introduce our panel so that we can get right into this.
All right. Well, thanks, my man. Look, since we don't have name tags on the pictures, as I'm introducing each one of you, if you could just kind of raise your hand so that our viewers will know who you are. First of all, I want to start with Robert Foster. Robert is the president of the American Tennis Association, better known as the ATA. If you don't know, the ATA is the oldest African American sports organization in the U.S. Founded in 1916, it has helped propel the starts of so many people's tennis careers, and it's great to have Robert a part because Arthur took part in the ATA. So welcome, Robert.
Thank you, Bryce.
We also have Mr. Marty Woods, who is the executive director of the Pete Brown Junior Tennis Program in Los Angeles, is also known as being a NJTL chapter, which is a program that Arthur helped found for the training and development of youth, not only in tennis, but in development of academic improvement and achievements and just overall development. So Marty, welcome to the show. And last but absolutely not least, we have Mr. Larry Nagler. Boy, and does he have a resume? Not only as a collegiate player in both basketball and tennis at UCLA, he did win the NCAA singles and doubles title in 1960. For the purpose of this conversation, well, let's add one more thing about his collegiate career. You know, he was a three-time first-team ITA All-American. He is the only person to be a three-time Pac-10 champion in tennis. But for the purpose of this conversation, he was not only a doubles partner to Arthur Ashe, he was not only an attorney for Arthur Ashe, but he was also a dear friend of Arthur Ashe's. So we welcome you, Larry, to the show as well.
Well, thank you so much. Great to be here.
Great to have you. Great having all of you guys. Larry, want to definitely get started with you. I mean, again, you played with Arthur, you beat Arthur 4-0. 5-0 because he tried to get you back on the court and you said, no, we're not having any of that, which I absolutely respect. But I want to start off with, again, I know that you were a senior at UCLA when Arthur and Charlie Passerell and all those guys came in. What was that? I just want to understand, what was that first meeting like? When these freshmen come in, you see Arthur Ashe. Again, you don't see very many men of color playing this game. He comes in as a freshman. Talk to us just about the experience in meeting him and just give us some dialogue on that, if you would.
Well, of course, first of all, Arthur's reputation preceded him. Everybody knew that here was a guy that was going to be a really fine player, and he chose UCLA. And at that particular time, UCLA was either the number one college tennis team in the country, or if not number one, it was right up there. And we had won the NC2As in 60 and 61. And then in 63, Arthur joined. No, actually 62, excuse me. And so, we were supposed hotshots. That is, Alan Fox and myself, and our team was very, very powerful team. And we had basically beaten all the other collegiate teams in the country. But these two young guys come out, Charlie from Puerto Rico and Arthur from back in Virginia. And, we look at them and they look at us, and they're figuring out who are we, and we're trying to figure out who are they. So sooner or later, JD, who was the coach and became the athletic director, started to pair us up. And so, he would intermix the matches for practice. So you can imagine the type of practice that we would have every day when you're playing with perhaps 3 or 4 or 5 of the top 10 collegiate tennis players in the United States. And there was at that particular time, freshmen were not allowed to play on the varsity. So the freshman team had its own matches and the varsity team had its own matches. But for practice, when there were no matches going on, we were hammering against each other's heads,
Yeah.
And we were starting to see who these guys were and what they were all about. And tennis is a very, very tight-knit world. Everybody knows everybody. So it didn't take very long for the old guys to get very close to the young guys. And we started playing tournaments together. And it was very interesting. At that particular time, if my memory serves me correctly, Walt Hazard came to UCLA also. And Walt was from Philadelphia. And he came up to my fraternity house, and I was playing basketball at UCLA, not really well, but enough to make the team. And we would go one-on-one in the hoop in the backyard, and I was thinking to myself, I'm not so sure that this is a sport for me here, what he's doing to me, this guy. And Art and Walt became very, very close friends, and we saw each other back east at the tennis tournaments. I mean, that's a long-winded way of telling you how we met and how the beginning, how it began. Let's just say that.
It's interesting because those years that you're talking about in the sport of tennis, that was before the open era.
Absolutely.
And so you said Arthur already came in with quite a reputation. So Robert, I wanted to ask you, was part of that reputation he had built, did that start from playing his results in the ATA tournaments?
Oh, yeah. Arthur, let me go back. So Arthur began his tennis career in Richmond. And there was a guy by the name of Ron Cherry who brought him to the attention of Dr. Whirlwind Johnson and Dr. Eaton. Now, Dr. Johnson is the founder and developer of the American Tennis Association Junior Development Program. And he did this at his own house in Richmond. Dr. Johnson had a medical facility in Lynchburg. And so he built a tennis court right next to his house. And he not only trained Arthur, Thea Gibson, Bob and Billy Davis. There are a lot of folks. And then there's there's a lot of other professionals who have gone through it. Like, for example, Leslie Allen, who is going to be out next weekend at, Pete Brown's tennis academy. And she went through Dr. Johnson's facility there. So anyway, Arthur played all of the ATA nationals and the local ATA tournaments. Because of segregation there was really no other outlet in the South. So it was through ATA tournaments. Now, Arthur ended up going to Dick Hudlin in St. Louis. So this is where Dr. Johnson says, basically, I've taken you as far as I can. Dick Hudlin, who is really a well-known African-American tennis coach who produced a lot of talent there in St. Louis. As a matter of fact, Arthur won the ATA men's single in 1960, 61, and 62. Now, I don't really know how JD became aware of Arthur, but at that time, Arthur was really in Dick Hudlin's program in St. Louis. So, maybe Larry may have heard some stories about how JD became aware of Arthur, but he was getting some national rankings because there were some tournaments in the North that he could play without any problems. And so, but yeah, we're very proud of Arthur, and Arthur and Althea, they were there too when Arthur was younger at Dr. Johnson. So it is really fascinating when I think of a lot of the physicians and federal judges who came through that tennis program. And so, when you think of social emotional learning that everyone's talking about now, if you read about Dr. Johnson and the discipline and the emotional self-regulation, and he was very big on self-regulation with the juniors that were there, and so he was pretty strict about that. And so I think I've heard Arthur talk about that training that Dr. Johnson instilled in him. He didn't really call bad calls, and he didn't really show a lot of emotion. So a lot of that training started with Dr. Johnson.
But I just want to stress that when he came to UCLA, he was 18. Mm-hmm. And at 18, you could make your mark in the tennis world. And he had enough wins against enough good players that everybody understood this was a guy to be reckoned with. And so JD obviously knew about him because JD was basically the coach of the number 1, 2, or 3, university in the country. And Charlie and Arthur were the number 1 and number 2 juniors in the United States. And they were coming to the best school they could go to become the best tennis players they could become. So they knew of him real well. And I knew of him real well. And I can't say to you how I first heard his name or anything like that, but it was well known. Gotcha. He was not an unknown when he showed up at UCLA.
Gotcha. And Robert, tying it back to ATA, he goes off to UCLA to play collegiate tennis. Did he maintain, and which I assumed he did, some level of communication contact with ATA, man? Did he still do anything or act in any? Yeah, go ahead, please expand.
Yeah, Arthur is a life member to this day of the American Tennis Association. Arthur was very big on helping the organization financially, and he had even offered to make Richmond and help build a facility to make Richmond the home of the ATA. Unfortunately, at that time, the ATA it would travel around the country annually, the national, so that it would be able to get people to come and have a good time who couldn't afford to travel. And so there was a debate on having one location for the ATA Nationals, and Arthur didn't win that argument. But Arthur, and many of our nationals, Arthur would still show up, and that's how committed Arthur was. I mean, and when you go to Richmond, I was just in Richmond last year at the the Black Tennis Hall of Fame. And I went down Monument Avenue and I saw this big statue of Arthur there. So he is really beloved in his hometown of Richmond. The one thing I will say, that there is a campaign at Woodland Cemetery to try and help beautify the cemetery where he and his mom are buried there. And they have it gated off, the area where he and his mom is. But Arthur was very dedicated to supporting the ATA and urban community tennis. That's the one thing he was really big on, was trying to grow the game outside of the country clubs and some of the places that kids just couldn't afford to play the game. And so, you figure he and Charlie Passarell and a few others, they were involved in reaching out to the urban center. So yeah, Arthur, the ATA is more like a family, and we're proud to say Arthur's still a life member.
So Larry, my question to you is, and I believe you said you were a senior when Arthur came in as a freshman?
I was a senior.
Okay, so did you two play together at all?
Well,
What?
what happened was after my senior year,
Mm-hmm.
JD came up to me and said, "How would you like to be Arthur's doubles partner on the circuit during the summer?" I said, "I'd love it." So we became doubles partners when he was going to be a sophomore and I was starting law school. So what would happen was I would go to law school, and then during the summer, I would just travel around the world and play the tournaments. And I played with Arthur. So we started playing at that time. We played for basically close to 2 years. And I think the first year was like full time for us, played all the tournaments everywhere. And then there was less, I was less available, but we still played in this, when I was a second year law student. So that's how it began. And we had success right away. I mean, we went back east and we won one of the big grass court tournaments almost right off the bat. And we got to very far in the national grass court doubles championships. And, you know, Bud Collins knew about us. You know, he was sniffing around and everything, trying to understand more about Arthur and talk to me and talk to Arthur as much as he could. And Arthur was a very self-reserved guy at that time. And he always was. I mean, he was very, very soft-spoken through his entire life, basically. And the things he did quietly were just so ridiculously great that it's hard to imagine. I mean, there's one famous story where Jesse Jackson came up to him and said, "You know, Arthur, we really would like you to speak out more. And, you know, you're just laying back here." And he said, "Jesse," he says, "I'm not you." He said, "I'm going to do it my way. You do it your way, and we'll see how it goes." So that's the way he was.
And I'm curious, Larry. I want to actually dig a little bit deeper. I want to get into some of the weeds here. So you played a lot of doubles tournaments together. I am just very curious. Who took the lead? Because typically when you're playing doubles, there's one person that typically is like the captain, and the other person, you know, making calls, where your serves go, blah blah blah. How did that dynamic work with you and Arthur when you hit the circuit? Were you the lead? Was he the lead? Did you both co-lead? Talk to us about that.
I'll tell you how it went. When I played the deuce side when I won the NC2A doubles championship with Alan Fox, and Arthur played the ad side. So it was natural for him to play the ad side, for me to play the deuce side. And I was like the senior. So and Arthur was very, very soft-spoken. I mean, he wasn't one to push anything, really. He did his talking with his racket. And so I would have to say there was no, quote, leader, except to the extent that you might say because I was older, I had a little bit more authority, if you will. But doubles in tennis is a type of game that if you're not acting like a team in every respect, you can't be good. You can't be good. You can't have one guy dominating anything, you know? So I would sit back and I would watch Arthur hit those backhands down the line on the returns of serve, you know, and I would scamper in behind my serve, and, you know, he served beautifully. So we just blossomed naturally. I can't say that anyone was the leader on that.
And just kind of piggybacking on that, so the dates or the years that you're talking about are still prior to the Open era, which I believe started in 1968. Yeah. So when you're out playing these tournaments, did you guys experience any kind of challenges or discrimination or whatever, because it was a very different type of scenario at that time?
Well, let me really clarify for you where we were at that time, okay? So when I was 18, I was on the Junior Davis Cup team. And there was a small group of guys that they were trying to see if they could, you know, develop. And we went down and we played in the South. And sure enough, for the first time, I see these signs, you know, colored only, and, you know, white only. And I couldn't believe it. Yeah. But when Arthur started to develop, he became like a mini celebrity. Everybody wanted to see him play. Everybody wanted to look at him under pressure. Everybody wanted to see what he could do. And he was basically welcomed everywhere he went. He was very, very much accepted into the world of tennis early on. I myself had, some incidents because I was Jewish, and I would stay at these very fancy country clubs at the homes of these people, and they would make these remarks. And I'm really angry with myself because I kept my mouth shut, so much. But I never experienced Arthur being directly derogated, where he was like a celebrity and everybody wanted to understand him and meet him and to know about him. So he came in very much welcomed, and everybody understood that, we had to have black athletes come play this game. It was ridiculous that we didn't. And so he was going to be the man. And he and I would discuss these types of things all the time. Of course, he came from Richmond and all of that we all know about. But when he came out here, I mean, he was like a celebrity. He really was, right from the beginning.
And I'm curious, and I'm going to throw this one over to Robert. Robert, did you get that sense as well, or have you heard stories about Arthur and his celebrity, if you will, when he was kind of coming up and really making himself, making a splash or making himself known to others? Did you sense any of that, or have you heard any stories in that regard, similar to Larry?
Yeah, I mean, I graduated from high school in 1972, and prior to that, tennis was not a thing in the Black community. If you were playing tennis, you weren't looked upon with favor. But when Arthur won the first U.S. Open in 1968, then it kind of changed the perspective of a lot of us baseball and football players. And not only that, the ladies like tennis. And so all of a sudden you start seeing a lot of tennis in the African American community. And what's really, I think, kind of turned was when in 1975, this is the 50th anniversary of Jimmy Connors and Arthur. And still, Arthur is the only African American male to win a Grand Slam and to win Wimbledon that year. And so what I think, just like Venus and Serena sometime later, what I think having a positive image of an African American male playing a sport like tennis or golf, being successful, that helped the business model in the community. I remember I still have a composite, the head composite racket that Arthur, I think that's a 75. He has that record, I met with Ray Benton, and he was talking about ProServe and how they represented Arthur during that, once he got the head contract. But anyway, yeah, I think the whole African American community, we were so excited that we all picked up rackets. Now there were. Now I want to say that the ATA back in 1916 and thereafter, tennis was through the African American middle class and elites. That's who got it started, and then it kind of grew from there. And so when you figure a lot of, like Dr. Johnson and a lot of our elite, they opened the doors to a lot of the urban centers for the tennis, and Arthur was the benefactor of Dr. Johnson exposing him to being a tournament player. I hope that kind of answered it.
Absolutely.
And so, Larry, I want to kind of move this along. So you graduate, you go to law school, you become an attorney. And did you not become Arthur's kind of like first attorney when he started playing professional tennis?
Yes, I was. What happened in a nutshell was this. I graduated undergraduate in 62. And I looked around and I said, I can't make a living being a professional tennis player because they don't have open tennis. They were talking about it, but it never was going to happen. So I had to make a decision. So I went to law school. But even while I was in law school, I was playing the circuit. So I graduate law school in 65, and I become a lawyer. And soon after that, Arthur and I became very fast friends. In fact, I sold him my motorcycles after I would use them at UCLA Law School. He would want them, after that to get around campus. And then when 1968 came along and open tennis was there, Arthur came to me and said, listen, I'd like you to help me figure out what do I want to do with all of this stuff. And I suppose some of you may know, but he decided we were discussing money with a lot of people, but he decided not to sign with anybody because he wanted to be on the United States Davis Cup team. He wanted to represent the United States. And at that particular time, the rules were so screwed up that there were so many different professional leagues and all of that if you were a pro, you couldn't play Davis Cup. Now that, of course, got ironed out. But at that particular time, there were 3 or 4 separate pro circuits at the very beginning. Jimmy Connors had one with, I forget the guy's name that ran it for him. The guy that owned the Kansas City Chiefs, Lamar Hunt, had one. And, Arthur and I talked to Lamar Hunt, and we came close to signing an agreement. I also represented Tom Ocker, who Arthur beat in the finals of the 68 U.S. Open. And I signed Ocker up with they called it the Handsome Eight, for Lamar Hunt. But anyhow, they had these different circuits. And then the USTA wanted to influence everything that was going on. They wanted to keep, a strong fist around the neck of all these other associations. And Jimmy Connors said no, and Lamar Hunt said no. And so there was all these conflicts. So at that particular time, Arthur and I traveled around, met with a bunch of people, and he didn't sign up with any league or with any person. He was offered tremendous amounts of money. And in fact, when he won the U.S. Open, I suppose you all know this, he refused to accept the prize money. I think it was like $7,500 for the winner. And he didn't want to do that because if he took it, he couldn't play Davis Cup. So some very wealthy guy gave him like 1,000 shares of General Motors stock that was worth like $8,000 and made it right for him. So that was the very, very early stages of open tennis. And at that particular time, it was frowned on to be what is now considered a wonderful thing to be, which is an agent for an athlete. And I had this concept that being an agent was kind of sleazy. So I said to Art, listen, I'll be your lawyer and help you any way I can. And I will negotiate the contracts and I'll give you any guidance that you feel is worthwhile. And we'll see where it all goes. But at that same time, Donald Dell became the captain of the United States Davis Cup team. And he started to travel with Arthur and Charlie. And so slowly but surely, Donald pulled Arthur and Charlie away, and I drifted back to Los Angeles because I was like traveling to Europe and, as a lawyer. And I didn't know whether I was an agent or a lawyer or what I was. So I basically bowed out of it at that stage. However, we remained friends for many, many years.
And so Larry, so you started representing him in what, 68, was it?
68, or actually, yeah, it was around 68, 69.
And so how long was that tenure as far as when you then came back to California and he kind of moved forward?
That I would say that I was dabbling for a couple of years.
Okay. Okay. Gotcha. And then it kind of went the agent route, it sounds.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, I was still trying to play tournaments at the same time. When Pacific Southwest came out here, I would qualify for that, and I would play in that tournament. I still had an I had an ATP ranking when I was 36 or 37 still.
Nice.
So I was dabbling, but you can't play that game part-time and do anything meaningful.
What ended up stopping the doubles with you and Arthur? I mean, you played for 2 years.
Yeah.
Why didn't that kind of?
Well, what happened then was Arthur started to develop, and I was in my third year of law school. I had to study for the bar exam, so I wasn't even available to go around and travel with him. And so naturally, he started to play with Charlie and with other people, and it just naturally developed in that way. And I had a front row seat to watching him develop not only as a player but as an international star human being. And we spoke about those types of things also when we'd see each other, which was from time to time.
And so, Larry, what did you see in Arthur that made him very different in terms of what you were seeing off the court?
Well, Arthur was an amazing man. First of all, he was very, very intelligent, and he did not force his opinion on anybody. What he wanted to do was listen and understand and ask questions and all of that. And he was very, very self-possessed and self-contained. And he was trying to figure out, what can I do to make the world a better place for the Black athletes and the tennis players? And so, early on, he came to me and he said, listen, I want to start and what we ended up calling it the National Junior Tennis League. And he described what his goals were. And Marty, of course, understands that better than anybody. But Arthur wanted to go into the underprivileged communities. He wanted to bring talent there. He wanted to bring tennis players there. He wanted to help the youngsters develop not only their tennis game, but their human spirit, basically. And so we started out with that whole thing, and it started to develop. And then when more and more people got interested in it, and as I drifted away from the involvement with the NJTL also. But it was always a very, very important contribution that Arthur made to society. And basically, what was amazing to me was sitting back and watching Arthur make decisions about how he was going to handle civil rights issues, seeing him march in Washington and get arrested, and seeing him go to South Africa and talking to him about that. They followed him around in South Africa, and he integrated the stands there, but he wouldn't play unless they agreed to integrate the stands. So I would sit there and watch this man do these things, and I said, there's no end to this guy. He could do anything. And I've even been quoted as saying, as far as I was concerned, he had the potential to be another Barack Obama if he stayed with it. I mean, everybody loved the guy. It was impossible not to love him. I mean, did you ever see him get angry or act like a jerk? Never. And I'll tell you something, the tennis players are, as a rule, pretty jerky. They're pretty bad guys. They all they care about is themselves and making money and playing and getting endorsements and this and that. And Arthur was very, very, very low key about all that. Very low key. And he was right at the beginning of all of the endorsement issues with head rackets and all that. So, I mean, but I watched all of it from the front row, basically.
Yeah. I can only imagine how amazing that must have been to see someone that, you basically played tennis with, kind of sort of mentored in a sense, just become this global icon, if you will. Absolutely amazing. Marty, I feel like we're treating you like the redheaded stepchild. So we're going to bring you in and let's have you talk a little bit about Arthur and the impact as it relates to the NJTL and kind of things that you're doing and seeing based on the impact that Arthur has had. Mute.
Great. You guys, you got me?
Yes, we got you.
Okay, great. First, I'd like to thank Larry for this opportunity. This is a total blessing to hear him speak about my mentor and just a guy that I'd be loved for probably my whole tennis career. So Larry, thank you. I appreciate it. I just want to tell my story. And Robert, I love how you connected all this, Robert. And my connection is just mind blowing because I never knew I was walking into this history. My mentor, Pete Brown, was a part of a team that wrote a letter directly to Arthur Ashe and his team in DC, asking Arthur Ashe and his group to bring the first NJTL chapter to Los Angeles. This letter was written September 1972. Arthur Ashe, 2 months later, Arthur Ashe and his team wrote back and said, yes, we would be honored for you guys to bring this program to Los Angeles and implement everything that we're about. The onboarding letter was incredible, guys. Not only did they mentor them, they gave them funders, opportunities to help with equipment and everything. Just basically opened everything up to that program. That summer, me and my family were walking to the tennis courts, and Pete Brown and that organization grabbed us off out of a tough neighborhood and asked us would we like to be a part of the first NJTO program. So I was inducted into the first NJTO program in the summer of 1973. How big is that in full circle? And now I run my same program that Pete Brown and Arthur Ashe mentored me and instilled in me with academics, life skills, tennis, fitness, and everything that comes with this wonderful sport. So this whole thing is big, full circle for me, and I'm so proud to be on this phone call. I have one quick question. I'm hoping I don't step off course here, and I'd like to ask Larry, were you a part of that conversation after the U.S. Open when Arthur Ashe and Donald Dale met for lunch and discussed the origin of the NJTL, that discussion that actually sparked the NJTL program? I'm just curious about that.
I was not present at that conversation, but I did have my own conversations with Arthur about what he wanted to accomplish, and he asked me to form the entity, which I did. So Donald was part of everything. He had his fingers in everything, and I love him and I hate him at the same time. He's just he's got a way of being involved in every aspect of it. He was, a promoter for the one of the tournaments, and he was representing the players, and it was all kinds of interesting things going on, and it was interesting. But I traveled with Donald and Arthur to some of these meetings that I've told you about. I remember one which you might find interesting. We went and met this guy. I won't tell you his name, but he was a CEO of a public corporation, and he had like an assistant guy that had his suit and tie and everything. And the assistant guy, we were at have a meeting there. The assistant guy comes over and he shows us a stock certificate and for this entity, and it has 50 million shares. So I did a quick look at the Wall Street Journal and see what the price was, and it was worth a lot of money. And so he was saying, "This guy's a genius. You got to sign up with him," and so forth. And Arthur said, "That's fine. we respect what he's done, but no, thank you. We're going to find our own pathway." And that's what he did with everything. Wow. So Donald was there, and I was there, and then Donald was there without me, and and that's the way life is.
Yes. So that was his own pathway. I love that story. I love it.
I was in New York last year, and I was with Charlie Passarell, and I was complimenting him on helping to be one of the founders, of the NJTL, and Sheridan and Snyder, and Charlie told me, he said, "Hey, this was really Arthur. I just was going along for the ride." And I thought that was a very humble position to take for Charlie.
Very
And
true.
so, okay.
Very
And
true.
so to anyone, and maybe Marty, you're the best one to answer this. For those that are watching this, what has the NJTL grown to be? You know, number of chapters, maybe the exposure, its presence in today's tennis environment.
Well, first of all, let me tell you that tennis would not be to where it is now if it wasn't for the NJTL and the ability to reach low-income areas or underserved areas was the mission. And I think that has been addressed. And there's several great players that have come out of these NJTLs. Francis Tiafo is one. Coco Golf was a part of an NJTL. So these NJTLs are doing important work and will continue to do important work. And NJTLs is a network of organizations. And this number, I would think there's thousands of organizations now that are NJTL programs that exist throughout the nation. And the most important thing is these programs remain in low income, underserved areas. That's the key. So yes, I'm on board for where this goes over the next 5 to 10 years, especially leading up to the 2028 Olympics, guys.
Yeah.
I mean, if the NJTLs and Larry, and I'm hoping, Robert, we can all help that they can be on the forefront of this, at the forefront of these Olympics, just to let folks know how important Arthur Ashe's contribution was to tennis and what it meant to Black tennis, would be a big stage. So.
Absolutely. Robert, I kind of want to throw something your way, because again, we're talking about the NJTL, it's Arthur's baby. He gets it started. How did that align with ATA and the objectives that they were doing at that point in time? So you see this NJTL, it's being formulated in California. You've got the ATA that's already kind of, doing its thing. Did Arthur reach out to the ATA? Was there any level of collaboration, alignment? I'm just curious as to how those two organizations, if at all, started working together.
There was no formal alignment with the ATA. Actually, Arthur and Nick Bolletariat had the Ashe Bolletariat program in New Jersey. And from there, I think it just kind of moved on to public parks, and Arthur was able to get funding for this program. I think this was really Arthur's own brain trust. The ATA, we are supportive on a global stages of expanding the tennis game. But when you look at the ATA, it is not as much a racial organization as it is a cultural expansion. And we have Black, Brown, Asian, but the genesis is in the Black community. And you have people of all colors playing at our national tournament, which is next week down in Orlando. So to be very specific, this was Arthur's baby, his brainchild, and he personally took this upon himself, as Larry says, and as Charlie Passarell said, he told me this was really Arthur's baby, and Arthur. This was a personal mission of Arthur, and what one of the things that I was struck by what Larry said, when he talked about the conversation that Arthur had with Jesse Jackson, that Arthur wanted to do things. He followed his own drum, and he would not be pressured into being out front in a way that he felt uncomfortable. But at the end of the day, when you look at the impact he had in South Africa, the impact he had with NJTL and throughout the community, and he would come to the ATA Nationals every year so that we all could look up to him, much like Coco Golf was an ATA development player. And so now we honored her parents a couple of years ago. They were nice enough to come to our annual gala. And so we don't look at the ATA, USTA, ITA as separate swim lanes. We look at this all pushing the game forward in our own way.
That's right.
And this has been great in terms of giving people the history, the background, understanding the man that was behind all this. But I want to take it back to him as a tennis player. And what we're celebrating right now is the 50th anniversary of his Wimbledon win. And just to kind of set the stage, Arthur, as we've said, is the only Black man to have won the U.S. Open in '68, the Australian Open in 1970. And in those, he may have been more favored to win those. But in 1975, when Arthur's 31, turning 32, he's playing a 22-year-old Jimmy Connors. He's going into Wimbledon. He is not the favorite to win this match. But this match has become known as one of the most iconic tennis matches in the history of the sport for a variety of different reasons. Larry, I want to start with you. What do you remember about that particular match?
Okay. Well, I think you put it really well when you said that he was a decided underdog. I think that Connors had beaten him a couple of times at least before that match. And I think the story is well known, but the night before, Dell and Charlie Passerelle and Arthur went out to have dinner, and they developed a strategy to deal with Connors in a way that was very unusual, particularly given Arthur's game. Arthur struck the ball pretty firmly most of the time, but he decided that what he was going to basically do is he was going to semi-chip the returns to get it really low and slow, so Connors couldn't just use your pace and basically bounce off your pace, and he had to develop his own pace. And on the grass, the match point's a perfect example of it. He served him wide to his backhand. He's got the two-handed backhand. And by the time Connors reached the ball, he was maybe 25 feet outside the doubles line, right? And Arthur just tapped the ball to the other side. But Connors had a lot of trouble with that, I'll call it the soft game that Arthur threw at him that day, which was completely contrary to his game. When I played him, it was wham bam, and he was gonna show me how it was really done. And but he was that smart that he realized that if he didn't change this game, he was a loser. I mean, I could give you other examples in today's world. I'll be very, very brief, but there was this match between Sinner and Alcaraz that was probably about 2 years ago. And Alcaraz was coming up, and he was trying to match Sinner blow for blow with ground stroke against ground stroke, and he was getting chewed apart. And so Alcaraz, of his own, started to figure out, he started to loop the ball, he started to slice the ball, he started to chip the ball, and all of a sudden Sinner didn't have that counterpunch that he could make off of a flat, and he ended up winning that match. Well, I think that Arthur did exactly that in his match with Jimmy Connors, and it was a thing of beauty to see.
Robert, do you remember that match?
Oh yeah. I remember watching it on CBS. It might have been tape delay, but I remember that match, and I was thinking, wow, look at this brother. He's doing this. And the thing I didn't really appreciate till I started playing tennis, and Larry will attest to this, that tennis is really about problem solving. And this tactic that he used now is a famous situation where I'm sure it's like a case study for some of the coaches to give their students. And Larry, it's great that we have you on here today because you personally played with him and you understood how his mentality and how he went about learning and developing into a great problem solver on the court.
Yeah, I mean, he had to learn. I mean, Djokovic is another good example, but Arthur had to learn to change his game, the game that he came in with, which was slash this and slash that and whack this and whack that. And he saw that only will take you so far. And the thing about tennis that's so interesting is that player A may match up with player B in a great way, and B will beat C and C will beat A. And they can't seem to unwind that. So the question is, how do you solve that problem, right? And Arthur beating Jimmy Connors in 75 was like a prime example of that. I mean, I don't think you could have a better example. And what it really showed was his intellect. That's what it really shows.
And Marty, of course, did you see that match?
Of course, guys. And actually, I was at my mentor Pete Brown's house. He had a watch party, and we were in his den watching it. And I remember watching every single point, every minute, every commercial. I don't even think I went to the restroom at any time, because I was so fascinated in that match, and it was so overwhelming to watch it. And I think what stood out to me was the tactics also. And I don't know if you guys remember, Arthur served and volleyed on his first and second serve several times in that match to Connors. That really, and so the tactics were big for me, and just him winning that was huge to our whole community. We celebrated for months, so it was big, and I remember every point.
And the final thing I want to add to this, and maybe Larry, you're the right one to talk about it. What blew my mind about that match wasn't at the time Jimmy Connors in a lawsuit against Arthur Ashe?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It sued Arthur, and they were in a lawsuit together, and Jimmy, bless his heart, dismissed it after the match.
What were you gonna say? I don't think match was about to come out of your mouth.
Yeah, I mean, he was the guy that he was working with was Bill Reardon, who had his mini circuit at the time, and I didn't recall until you mentioned that he was 22 at the time that Arthur beat him in 75, but Connors was beating everybody. And it wasn't pretty. He was just taking everybody apart. But at this time, he got flummoxed, and he was unable to solve the problem.
Call him Sabalenka at Roland Garros this year. Sorry. Anyway, side note. Larry, I'm curious, and this is so off the subject, but I just really want to ask this question. So you're married, you invite Arthur over for a meal, you treat him to some bagels, lox, and cream cheese. Did Arthur by chance introduce you to any cuisine, any Southern cuisine? Did he introduce you to anything from his side, if you will?
You know, he did not. He did not. I really enjoyed sitting down with him and BSing about the world, and so we spent our time doing that. You know, maybe drinking a cup of coffee and having lox and bagels and all that, but still we would talk about what was going on, and he was always looking for a way to make things better, particularly for the underserved community. And I mean, that was his position from day one, really. And you know, he had to be a model citizen because everybody was putting him under a microscope. He made no mistakes, none. He was beloved.
And, you know, as we have honored and celebrated, you know, this huge achievement he made 50 years ago, we're coming to the end of our time here. What I'd like to do is to go down the line here and get, what are your final thoughts on Arthur Ashe, his legacy, and, you know, what he has represented to the game and to people in general? And Marty, we'll start with you.
Sure, I can make mine quick, guys. I just wanted to say thank you to Arthur Ashe. Arthur Ashe opened a door that I was able to walk through at a tough time in my life when I needed a father figure, a mentor, a coach, an academic advisor, all of that. My mentor, Pete Brown, was basically mentored by Arthur Ashe. So I really appreciate that. And I hope his legacy lives on forever. And I'm going to make sure that my program respects his values and his mission and everything he meant.
Awesome. Robert.
Yeah, this is not only the 50th anniversary of Arthur winning Wimbledon, but the 75th anniversary of Althea Gibson, who in 1950, who broke the color barrier by being invited to play in the U.S. Nationals. And at that time, it was Alice Marble who wrote an editorial, who in a sense, who basically called upon the U.S. Open Committee to allow her to play. And so when I think of Arthur, I think of Althea, I think of Alice Marble, I think of all those, and something that Althea said, that no matter what we accomplish, we need help. And when I think of the NJTL program that Arthur and Sheridan and Charlie started, it was about helping those who were less fortunate. And I think that's what I think mostly about Arthur Ashe, who was someone who was a giver. As Dr. King says, we all can't be famous, but we can all be great, because greatness is determined by the service we give to our community.
That's beautiful. And last but not least, Larry.
Well, I look at it this way. I am so awed by what Arthur accomplished in his very short lifetime, that to me, the thing that never goes away is the fact that we lost him so young. Because I don't think there was any limit to what Arthur could have done for society. And I mean that sincerely. And so that's the way I think about it. What a loss to humanity. What a loss.
Beautiful statement, Larry. Beautiful statement, and a beautiful way to close out this session. Gentlemen, thank you all so very much for taking the time out to get on this podcast, share your thoughts, share your memories. Bryce and I, like I said, we've established Brothers on Tennis on the backbone of Arthur Ashe. That is the reason why we are here. That is why we do what we do. And we're, again, trying to push the tennis world forward. And again, there would be none of this, in our opinion, without Arthur Ashe.
Yeah.
So
thank you.
On behalf of the podcast, we thank you, Marty Woods, Robert Foster, and Larry Nagler. What a great tribute to a great man. Everyone, take care.
Yeah.